Can the political situation in the U.S. be fixed? Inga, who lives in Moscow, offers some provocative thoughts in this interview, conducted over Zoom. As with many people I've spoken to outside the U.S., Inga takes an interest in American politics, and her perspective appears well informed. However, her confidence in her claim seemed far stronger than the justifications that supported it. After our conversation, once she'd had a chance to reflect, Inga messaged me saying, "I stated at the beginning of our conversation that I was too unsure about everything, and then I ended up giving my confidence level a rating of over 100. I am thinking now it's because the topic is so emotionally charged for me. Emotions do mislead our rational thinking." Our entire discussion lasted nearly 2 hours, so I've edited out some of the discussion at the beginning and the end of the recording. If you'd like to hear the full, unedited conversation, become a supporter of the channel, and I can provide a link to the raw recording. My name is Nick, and this is Conversations on the Coast.
I just want some fresh air. It's 8:30 here. It's very dark. It's night and pretty cold. It's below freezing temperature. I wanted to say below zero, but knowing you have Fahrenheit, everything is above zero. It doesn't make sense.
No, I'm very
I'll
familiar.
tell you something funny.
Yeah.
Uh, when it's cold and especially dark and
Mm.
depressing here in the winter, the clouds and everything, I can switch my weather app to Fahrenheit, and all of a sudden
Okay.
we have summer. We have summer. I did it today.
That's funny. I like it.
That's funny. Yes.
That's good.
Okay, I'm ready for the interview.
Cool. Yeah, so what do you want to talk about? What is your
Um,
belief that you want to examine?
that might not sound good, but honestly, I don't think I hold any real firm beliefs. Whenever I explore my beliefs, zoom in closely, I kind of see that the picture that I tend to believe falls apart, as if they are pieces that I don't really have a lot of evidence for.
Yeah.
But you can't, um, there's no other choice. As a human being, you have to make decisions every day, every minute, and you base them on whatever intuition you have in the moment. So I call it my belief. And some
Yeah.
of my beliefs are firm, but when I zoom in, all of a sudden it doesn't hold, um, a lot of them can't hold water.
Okay.
And so keeping that in mind, I can explore any belief, but when we zoom in, we'll find out there is not much ground behind them, which frustrates me a little bit. But I also know that that's how science works. Science doesn't say that we know things. It's there is a on YouTube there is a community called Less Wrong. You can become less wrong, but you cannot be like perfectly right. So maybe it's just the sign that I'm seeing the world correctly.
I like that. I like that concept of yeah, becoming less wrong.
Less wrong. And we never know if we are in the right direction, but we can always hope.
Hmm.
Let's take the politics if you think it's the appropriate one.
I mean, it's up to you, but that's fine. So yeah, so you mentioned several things. Where would you like to start? Do you want to start with talking about American politics and the thought that American politics needs to change?
That sounds tempting because I don't think I ever discussed it in SE terms.
Mhm.
And we can do that.
Cool.
Also, I might change my opinion by the end.
We'll see. It's not about changing your opinions. It's about understanding how you form beliefs and then figuring out if there's better ways to form beliefs. So,
Right, right.
so tell me more about that thought. I mean, let's kind of define terms. So when you say American politics needs to change, I think we need to explore what all of that means. So what do you mean when you say American politics, and what does you mean by saying that it needs to change?
I would rephrase as American political system,
Okay.
the rules, how it's made. And by changed, the ground rules, like laws, in that case, may be something as sacred as parts of the Constitution.
Okay.
But I know it's sacred. It's a ground that should not be touched ever, or at least to some opinions, to some people. And it saved the country quite well over the last centuries. I mean, the Constitution worked well. So I was talking about laws and the rules, regulations, how much money a candidate must have, or where money comes from, or who votes, direct voting or indirect voting. And I might be using some incorrect terms here. I'm not perfect, but also I was talking about, let me think, like how easy or difficult it is for a new party to enter the scene of politics or to leave it. And more, like the list can be continued.
Sure. How do we focus that down? What do you think is the most important thing that needs to change, and why?
As I discussed earlier with you a little bit, my main concern lies in the fact that there are two main parties, and it seemed to have been the case for the time while back. And I believe that it's not a healthy way to conduct politics, and we can dive into it. So we might take it as my belief.
Okay. So why do you believe that having only two parties is unhealthy?
And of course, there are more, like we discussed. I know about that fact, but I'm discussing the ones that matter, the ones that are discussed on social media and everywhere, mass media. Why it is unhealthy? The question is why it is unhealthy in my mind.
Yeah, why do you believe that it's unhealthy?
Mm-hmm.
What's the main reason that you believe? You may have a number of different beliefs about that.
Um, it's diminishing choice that people make when they form an alliance with a party. And instead of finding the best choice, they are made to find the least of two evils, often. And if they stick to a party and they find it less than perfect, they cannot find another one that is more perfect. It's not like a perfection scale would be 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like a perfection scale that is 1 and -1. You don't have that much freedom of choice. And as we know, in democracy or in the free market, the more choice we have, the more options we have to make a choice and to vote with our wallet, with our voting rights, the better. In this case, it sounds like, though technically it is democracy, but it acts like something else. I also know, I'm not quite sure, but I saw that and people talked about the fact that major corporations tend to keep their butts safe by giving money to both candidates at the same time. I saw like screenshots on government websites where like this candidate who gave money and this candidate who gave money, and like two parties, they're opposite in most issues, they have opposite views. And Coca-Cola, for example, or another major corporation, and they just give money to this and to that, almost the same amounts, which means it is not about beliefs, convictions. It's not about it's about keeping their safe place in the system. And that sounds wrong, if that's the case. I should stop here because I can talk for the next hour.
No, that's that's fine. It's one thing that jumped out to me is you mentioned that in a free market system, it's good to have choice so consumers can make a choice from many options. Why is economics a good reason to believe, or is it, do you think it's a good comparison, or why do you believe that economics is a good model for the way politics should work?
I think it's not economics per se that I was referring to.
Mm.
The free market was just one model of many where we have many options and the right for a free choice. When you find a partner and you marry, you don't want to be stuck with only two candidates. And so on. When you choose a kindergarten or a school, in the Soviet Union, you tended to have one school, period.
Mm.
But the more schools, but okay, it's the market again. It's just in general, it's about core uh, opposite of cooperation. Um, um, Give me the word. Cooperation,
I competition.
competition. It's about competition
Okay.
of ideas or of strategies, of ways.
Why do you believe that competition will result in a better outcome?
Good question. I think maybe not always. In general, when I think as a teacher, I work as a teacher. I don't think that competition among students in a class leads to better results of forming a better personality. So we must look like in which areas competition works better and in which it should be reduced. And maybe it can never be reduced to zero, and maybe it can never be the perfect 100%, like from which perspective you look. But I think from answering your question, I think uh, from the history, from past evidence, we can see if we compare countries, the more
Mm.
competition, the better results economically. Taking the Soviet Union, where I was born, once again, if you, I don't know, have societies. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think from evidence we can see that sometimes competition works greatly, and democracy also lies in the idea that competition of ideas uh, that happens in a dialogue, hopefully. It provides like more understanding if ideas fight and struggle with each other. One other reason why I think two political political party two parties only political system is not healthy is I think it creates a greater divide. Like many people agree with that if you only think left and right, black and white, hot and cold, you don't think in between. You don't have the options, and sometimes it's forbidden. Your family or colleagues might reject you. You can't think in the middle. And most of the times, what we actually think is in the middle. That's my kind of experience in life. So that's why I think it is unhealthy.
Okay. So to summarize, um, having only two parties is unhealthy because it sets up an either or black and white situation, and that forces everybody into one of two camps. Is that what you're
Mhm. Yes,
right? Cool.
please.
Um, is it possible to have two options and have them both be good outcomes?
I guess so, yes.
Okay. So what is it about the system currently in place? Hmm. What I'm wondering is for the system currently in place, if we're getting into bad outcomes and enmity between the two sides and feeling like they're opposites, is that do you believe that that's inherently because there are two options? What are some other reasons that that could be happening?
Hmm. I think I will ask you to rephrase your question
Um, it,
after you finish eating. That is.
it's possible that if you had, let's say you introduced a third option, why do you
Mhm.
believe that having, say, three options would not have the same problem that you have today with two options?
It might. It might still, the same problem might still continue. Uh, I'm tempted to give an example from personal life of people, not just mine. But like if in a family there are two people and they have a conversation that might easily get to an argument.
Mm.
And if there are three people, it tends to be less, the third person tends to find ways to give balance most often.
Mm.
I know it's not political, but it often happens so that a system that has at least three pivoting points, basic points, stationary points, they tend to be more stable and not going like out of control. Because in basis in our basis, I think we want stability. We just
Mm.
don't always know how to keep emotions contained, anxiety especially. In the root of polarization, I believe there is anxiety, or at least part of it. And we don't know how to deal with anxiety, but the more sides to a story, the easier we all work to keep things in check and balance.
Mhm. Thinking about balance and your example of having a third option, do you have examples that you're thinking of in politics where a third option helped to create balance?
I would say so. Um, in Germany, like I said before, they have more than two major parties, maybe at least three or four major parties, and then a few less smaller, less important, but also kind of important. And some of them far to the right, some of them far to the left, but the major ones tend to be like in the middle, the monster fighters.
Okay.
And of course, they sometimes fight, but they try to keep it civil. And I'm monitoring their election results. And what I see, one party wins, or two parties, they form a coalition. That's what they do. To have the majority in the parliament. Then they do things. They vote for a prime minister. Wait, yeah, prime minister of the country for the parliament. And then they make decisions month after month, year after year. And people get annoyed at some of the decisions. Too many immigrants, too few immigrants, whatever, too much money for military support, too few money. Like anyone can be irritated with any decision. But on average, the accumulated frustration and anger makes the same people vote now for another party. And like, really, I can see the shift. So this party was bigger. Now this was bigger. Same in the US, absolutely the same. But you have two. And here it's one party won, and then next election, the other party won, and then next election, the third party won. And I see that the frustration that people have, it doesn't lead to a revolution, so to speak. They don't go into the streets as much as they just change the party. And why having two parties does not work the same way? Because especially if they are highly polarized, you will not go and switch parties. Some people do, I know, but most people will never go and switch parties because the views are so opposite. It just doesn't happen. Either you are religious or not, and you just don't switch it like that in one day. Either you believe, I don't know, women's rights, or you don't. You don't switch that belief on and off. But in Germany, for example, because they have several parties, some of them are closer to you, and you have the option to choose, and the frustration just goes into changing, but not betraying your most important views.
So why is the situation in Germany, which thank you for that description. That's an excellent description. And I heard several things in there that were different. Why is the situation in Germany uh, a good analog of what might happen in the United States? Why is the situation in Germany a good reason to believe that the American political situation should change? Um, yeah, I'll
I
just leave.
think the way I understand you correctly, if can we really transfer what's happening in one country, um, imply that it will also happen the same way in another country? And I agree with you that we need to factor out cultural factors. And the US is such a huge, insanely huge country that it almost looks like several countries poorly combined together, which it is.
Says the person from the former Soviet Union.
Yeah, but the former Soviet Union did its thing. It's no longer one country.
No, I understand, and who knows if America might go the same way. Anyway, sorry, this is a
No,
sidebar.
we're not going to make any prognosis, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to the yeah, so America is this insanely large country. Sorry, I made a joke and I derailed you.
No,
Um,
no, you said exactly what was on my mind. So it's we can never know if we transplant one system from one country to the other. We must factor in so much we can never make sure.
yeah,
But I think we can make educated guesses, and German and American culture, at least, is Western culture. It's rooted in a lot of Western values. Democracy being one of them, fairness being another one, and so on. For example, if we took some maybe Asian countries, maybe or some African, maybe not all of them would, like, we would have to factor in something. But I have the belief that it would work in every country, but that's a
okay.
belief I don't have to defend. I have to defend it only for the USA, and I think it's because the history and the values. So many people came, the ancestors came from Germany, I learned. It's
Mm.
like almost every fourth person or something I learned recently came from Germany in some way, German-speaking countries. So there has to be a lot of commonalities in how people think, I think.
Interesting. We didn't and I frequently make this mistake, or maybe not a mistake, but in SE we like to talk about a confidence scale in your belief. What level of confidence between 0 and 100 are you that the American two-party system needs to change?
Am I allowed to go above 100?
Um,
Can I say 102.3?
That would be a fever if my body temperature were that high. Um, okay, sure. Um,
Okay, I
so
I should go below 100, but I am reluctant. But let me say 99 point something will be a good description.
okay, so you're highly confident. So my question is, if the proposed model of using like a model like the like Germany does, if if you're unsure about whether that's a good analogy to the situation in the United States, why does that justify you being at a 99 point something percent confidence?
It is not a good analogy. Why is it not a good analogy?
Well, you
It is
said you
good.
weren't you said you weren't sure. Like when I asked you why you believed that the situation in Germany, when applied to the United States, would have similar outcomes.
I mostly said that we have to factor in culture always when we discuss how things transferred from one that will not be wise if we make that quick logical decision. If it works here, it will work there. It will not be wise and logical and scientific to not factor the culture in. But like I said, I believe that both countries have long history with democracy.
Mhm.
And I do not, in my inner vision, I don't see, I just don't see anything that would threaten it, like why it wouldn't work. I just don't see it. I cannot imagine. That's why it's so high on the scale for me.
Why is not being able to think of a
Good reasons is enough.
why, yeah, why if you can't think of a reason why it wouldn't be true,
Mhm.
is that a good reason to believe the proposition is true?
So I also discussed it with many friends, and I was silently waiting for them to give me reasons. And if no one else is able to give me reasons, then it increases my probability over the years. And my 102.3 comes from extreme frustration. I want my friends to be happy and not be silently fearful of a civil war, which is insane. Just imagining that a civil war is possible is insane in 21st century. And if people who are intelligent say this to me, I think like I begin to tear my um, hairs out of my skull. But you might ask, why the wish to tear the hair out of your skull is a good reason to believe something? No, it is not.
You got it.
It's
You got
purely
it.
emotional.
You got the pattern. You got the pattern. So
It's purely emotional.
why is your emotional frustration a good reason to be at a high level of confidence in what you consider to be a fact or something that you believe?
No, 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 no. It doesn't. I think it is wise to listen to our intuition, which is formed by emotional reactions strongly. So emotions play their part in thinking.
Hmm.
If you intuitively and emotionally feel something, it should not be just dismissed. And you then think about it and then you discuss it. And if your emotions, your intuition, and the discussions all end up in the same place,
Yeah.
then your level of confidence can rise. But even if your discussions say something, but your emotions show something else, like I'm trying to point out that emotions also play a significant role. Sometimes they are false, sometimes they are true, but they have to be figured out in the picture.
So is it possible that you could have emotions and intuitions, strong ones, and the conclusion that you draw from them is not correct?
Very much, very possible.
Okay. So are the emotions a good reason to be at a 102.3% confident?
Emotions alone, not.
Okay. So what are the other things that support that belief other than the emotions and the
I
or
said emotions are the starter, and then you begin to think, discuss, read, and explore. And I think my thinking, discussing, reading, and exploring. Okay, let's not say it's 102. Let's say it's but still it's 98 or 99. You're not going to lower me by your questions. You're not going to really. I don't. I firmly believe that there need to be changes,
Mm,
and that comes not from emotions, but from a lot of deep thinking that I did over the years
yeah.
that did not like sometimes you think and you see, okay, this is the upside and this is the downside, and you weigh upsides and downsides. In this case, I found zero upsides. I found zero. So it is telling. If you think about an issue and you don't see like benefits,
Mhm.
maybe there were benefits in the past. For example, people could not travel far distances, and so some voters had to go and vote for them. That's what I read about. Maybe there were upsides in the past, but maybe not anymore. So I have not found like the upsides to the reasons how how the situation is designed now.
Okay. What what is it that makes your thinking through the issue a good support for your confidence?
So how much I really trust or should trust my thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and let me go with a hypothetical, right? Let's say here, hold on a sec. I'm gonna get a buddy here. I should have had my props ready. Um, so this is Al.
Mm-hmm.
He's not from here.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so Al also has done a lot of thinking and a lot of looking at the American system. And based on his thinking, he's come to the conclusion that the system is as good as it can possibly be as it is. So how can I, as a disinterested party, let's say I'm Switzerland, let's say I'm not from the US, let's say I'm Switzerland and I'm looking at your opinion and I'm looking at Al's opinion, and I'm looking at the fact that he did a whole bunch of looking and thinking and he's been thinking
And
through.
discussing.
You did a lot of discussions and thinking through things.
Mhm.
How can I determine which one of you is correct?
Maybe based on whom you like best, who smiles more to you. I don't know how your evaluation process goes, but going back to truth, like who is
Yeah.
closer to truth?
How do I determine who's closer to truth if it's both based on the best use of your intellect?
Maybe one that is not made of plastic. Let me think. I really have to think about
Yeah.
it.
Realize you were made of plastic. Al is a real flesh and blood alien here.
Gosh, I want to meet him.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah. I would have to think. Um, Because we have no evidence that aliens exist, I never factored in alien thinking, and it might not apply to our reasoning whatsoever.
Mm.
Maybe we should not discuss aliens at all. We don't even know they exist, and we don't know how their thought process goes. Maybe it is not compatible. Maybe their society is telepathic or works so differently that will look at ours and say, are you all guys crazy? Why don't you do the same thing? Like, why don't you think the same thing? Maybe they cannot understand us at all. I kind of think it's counterproductive to bring in an alien, but if you choose not an alien, but maybe a person from Indonesia or like another place, or a person who is just an opponent of mine, just a complete opponent who would say this is the perfect. He's a human. He thinks it's a perfect system.
Yeah,
Maybe he just loves your constitution.
we can pretend Al is a human. This is just the
I
is
Uh-huh.
the takeaway that I found. So
Maybe I'm taking the alien part too seriously, but we don't know about their thinking. They might not be a good opponent in a discussion.
how could we figure out whether your thinking has better justification or Al's thinking has better justification?
I think I have been thinking about this very same question and trying to figure it out for many months, uh, recent months.
Mhm.
And I struggle with I come to a conclusion that really all we have, if it's science, then sometimes you can have strict opinion based on facts. Alexandria really existed. Here is the evidence.
Mhm.
Or dinosaur really existed, or the moon consists of that and that, and we kind of can have evidence. And
Mhm.
sometimes some sciences are vague, and then you have opinions. Even scientists have their opinions inside the science. Like in psychology, some psychologists can never agree. It's vague. And
Right.
in some areas of thinking, we have to make decisions. Like, should we keep this political system? Should we change it? We have to make decisions. But there is no such structure. Basically, on average, I think there is nothing but a whole world of opinions and books, and you swim in it, each person, you swim in it, you stumble upon either a good professor or a good book. But
Mhm.
you never know if it's a good, convincing book because it's true or because it's a conspiracy theory source, but it's
Yeah.
produced, it's made so good that it's convincing. You
So how
struggle,
can
we all struggle.
I love the book idea because the book models like the thought of your thinking, right? So let's
And
take a
then every next idea will come to you through the prism, through the filter of what you read in the book. And oftentimes, I speak from personal opinion, experience. Oftentimes we take a book, we read it, we're convinced by it, and then
Mm.
we filter the world through it. Like my mom filters through her Christian Bible, and some other people have their filters, and I have mine. And so, in essence, to answer your question, sadly, we kind of we are left in the world of ideas like fish in water. We encounter things and we can form our opinions, like I said, close to 100. And we can sometimes be very sure, but there is no such thing like a Bible. You just open it or whatever, a textbook, and you just have all the answers there. We have to answer your question, how do you differentiate between me and the other man and who's closer to truth? I think you personally, it's one thing what how you differentiate. Like you might listen to me, to him, ask us to give you the sources, the books or whatever, or
Wow.
discuss at length. But the humanity in general, we have this wonderful tool called science, which works sadly on the scale of centuries. So maybe a century later, unpacking what was happening in Germany, what was happening in the US, people will see like it's so clear, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
But and maybe it will be obvious at some point. And I think I will answer a question that in the long term, scientists might give us better answers. Who is closer to truth, me or your alien?
Mhm.
That's the closest we can get.
So it sounds like you're talking about that. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. If I'm examining your argument and Al's argument, or by analogy, if I'm looking at one book and I'm looking at another book and they have two different opinions, and you said one of these books can just be conspiracy theories and one of these books can be factual.
Well, sir. Mhm.
Yeah, how can I determine which of those is more likely true?
So not humanity as a whole, not scientific community as a whole, but you personally. Um, well, I would have to ask you how you do it. And or you can ask me how I do it, but I think we all have all our like shortcuts in our methods. So your method might be different from mine.
So why are your shortcuts a good reason to believe that that book is telling the truth?
So now we're talking about a hypothetical book. And why do you choose to believe some books?
Yeah, and you see, I'm just making an analogy between your thoughts and Al's thoughts. This
Okay, yeah.
could be true. Let's say you both wrote these books
Methods.
in the
How
book.
we determine what is true, what our methods are.
Yeah. How do I determine which one of you? And you mentioned something intriguing, which is you mentioned looking at the sources behind the book. Can I look at the sources behind your thinking?
Right, like mine.
Yeah.
With regard to American politics, I would have to think and give you the list of what I was watching and reading. It could go from some Wikipedia articles and some books. One of my favorite ones is Why Nations Fail. I think it's a must read, and I think the author somehow won either a Nobel Prize or was close to it. A fantastic book about countries all over the world. It's a must read, I think. Why Nations Fail. It doesn't really discuss American politics specifically, more how societies work to flourish, to profit, versus when it doesn't work. Maybe it was one of my sources, but not the only one and not the first one. But all in all, if you ask me about my sources, I would have to sit down with a pen and some paper and write it down, the sources for you.
Yeah. So let's narrow in on the one that you know that you remembered. So why is knowing that your belief was founded on the book Why Nations Fail, why is that a good reason for me to adopt your confidence level of 102.3?
I think if I see where the question actually leads,
Mm,
I think if I try to understand your question and how to answer it,
yeah.
um, I think what we do over time, first, we humans, we tend to gain a lot of confidence. We read one book, talk to one person. I'm
Mm,
talking about myself, but so often it happens, and you're just, now I know everything.
yep.
I think some people call it Donald Kruger effect, something
Hmm.
where like the less you know, the more confident you are that you know everything. But I think at some point, years go by, and as you come back to this, especially if some people question your belief. For example, I don't believe in a God, but my mom would say, "But why don't you pray or something? It's so easy. Otherwise you might go to hell, or God will help you with your studies, like anything."
Yeah.
And if you don't have good reasons, if you only had one book or one thought or one conversation, then you re-question, you come back to that and like, what reasons do I really have? And sometimes it makes you think and you find another book you read again. And sometimes it's helpful to read criticism of a book. For example,
Mm,
you go
okay.
read what people say who don't agree. And then at some point, I truly think we cannot dive deep in all possible issues. You have to find your like 5 to 10 things you can really dive into to be happy in life.
Yeah.
But in one of them, if you think you know everything, then you begin to question, or people begin to question you, and you find more sources. And sometimes you find that desire, the will to like explore the opposite side. And then I think as a result, like to answer your question fully to the end,
Mm,
as a result of years going by and you doing more thinking and talking, as a result, when you read the criticisms of what you currently believe, either you adopt one of them and change your position, or
mm.
you begin to see the pattern. Okay, they all say different things, like, all the 200,000 comments on YouTube, all critical. Either you see some of them fall in one pattern. Like these come from religious thinking, that God says something. The other fall into a pattern of that's what my family believes. Like the criticisms begin to fall into patterns, form patterns. And you might have shortcut thinking to those patterns. For example, I don't find this good reasoning that it is true because your family believes it. I don't think it's good reasoning to believe that because newspapers say it, because in Soviet Union we had that. All newspapers say one and the truth was something else. So at some point you look through the criticisms and you have ideas about all of them, and either you end up seeing no more criticisms, that you don't have something to counter them. If you find no such criticisms, like with the idea of a God, like each day someone else would say something and they fall into a category, and at some point I hear no new ideas, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm done with it, and then my belief goes very up in the scale, and then my necessity to think deeper in that direction lessens, and I just completely switch to something else. And that's how it can stay high. Once again, we can never be sure about things, but I think to finish answering your question, like at some point we look at all the criticisms, and that's how we can become high in our belief scale.
Okay. So you're looking at multiple minds looking at the same thing, and you're listening to diversity of opinion.
Where they are coming from.
Yeah. Why is listening to a diversity of opinion a good reason to believe to hold a high confidence?
Uh, isn't it obvious?
Well, let me ask it this way. Is it possible that everybody whose opinions we listen to doesn't know what they're talking about?
Is it possible that they just don't know what they're talking about?
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of people like you and I could uh I'm guessing you don't have a degree in marine biology, hopefully, or else this won't do. But you and I could argue about how dolphin society works. And we could get five other people's opinions. And if none of those people have studied marine biology or have studied dolphins, we're all just spouting nonsense. So how do you determine that all the people that you've listened to, including the author of How Nations Fail, how do you determine that they're not all just uninformed?
I think you have just answered your own question, and I'll just repeat your answer.
Okay.
So, I tend not to have opinions well, I always have intuitive opinions.
Okay.
I think that we all have it. Like, if you must make a decision, there has to be some immediate inclination, like immediate feeling, most of the time.
Yeah.
But I tend not to have opinions in areas where I didn't study that science deep enough, like chemistry, biology. I had my school classes. I have some opinions. Most of it is based on science, some on personal experience.
Hmm.
But I tend not to voice my opinions very vehemently if it's a scientific fact that I have no understanding of. So your examples of people talking nonsense, they will, to me, when I read criticisms,
Mm.
critique, to me, they will at some point fall into one category of people talking, not knowing what they're talking about. I'll check their degrees if it's important. Sometimes it's not important. Not always we need a degree.
Yeah.
But back to politics, for example, or economy, that book, that was my number one question. That book was really highly recommended more than once by
Mm.
people whose thinking I trust.
Okay.
And when I heard it one time, I thought like, nah, too big a book, too boring. I heard it another time, I heard it third time, and I was like, okay, they all like vehemently say we all must read it. It's like a must read. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try. And my first question was, who wrote it? And it was a prominent, famous economist and his partner economist from two different countries, which is important. I thought, wow, it's wonderful that one is American guy, but most of the literature I read comes from America. Like you can become very one-sided if you do that. And the other, like the main author, the Nobel Prize, I think, or he won something. Maybe it was a Nobel Prize, but I think he was a Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah.
Um, he comes from Turkey. He lives in Turkey. He's a
Mhm.
Turkish person. And
Yeah.
that's a completely different story. They are like so Eastern, like so Asian, really. I mean, much more than they're not really a Western society. And like two people, an American professor and a Turkish professor, combining their forces, to me, it's like we go a level up. We go above the cultures and we go one level up to see closer to truth.
Nice.
So I was looking into the source, like who is the person, what their degrees are, what their scientific um like how the scientific community sees their reputation, and they are highly reputable. And then I started reading. Otherwise, I would like, yeah, it sounds so cute.
So ultimately, what
Science.
confidence?
Ultimately, we go back to science. Always,
Yeah,
always.
but well, okay. I mean we can talk about that, but I'm wondering, you're talking a lot about prizes, awards, reputation,
Yeah. Okay.
or degree. Are those the things that make them believable? Should we have high confidence in someone because he said something and he has an advanced degree?
That's true. That's why I said professors from two so different countries sounded like uh, a good thing, like this collaboration, because definitely a whole country can become biased, like inside, collapse inside it in its own bias, and then the whole community, scientific community, might. That's
Yeah.
why maybe that's your answer why I should listen to criticisms of different people or their thoughts, because maybe the more people are there who thinks about an issue, the closer we can come to truth. Um, but of course, there are many caveats to that. For example, if we have um, free speech, if there is no free speech, then we end up with some famous scientific problems we had in the Soviet Union, where either you believe what the party says or you go to prison, even if scientifically it's closer to truth.
Yeah.
So the freedom of speech is one important thing, but in these days, when freedom of speech, okay, no, it has always been the case that freedom of speech has its side, that everyone can say anything. And for example, in good old days of my childhood, we were reading newspapers and magazines and TV shows that were scientifically verified. Maybe it was also politically correct, but they tried their best to sound very scientific. In all the newspapers I had, all the TV shows, programs, they tried hard. It was like a rule. And then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the Western culture like flooded into the country, we started getting all the UFO stories and all the abduction stories, and then the ghost stories, and it was the downside. And I grew up like people believing all sorts of things, starting to believe because it was fun. It was so fun to believe in that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think the freedom of speech and publication is still the key, because people who do science, uh, they what's the word? They can criticize and verify each other beliefs. For example, I believe something, And luckily, my friends, when I say something, most of them will immediately come back to me and say, "Hey, why do you believe that?" And I tended to be very irritated with that. And I'm very grateful because they put me on the right track of like, okay, come back from heaven to earth. Why? And I have to defend my position. And it's the same way how, even if they agree with me, that's the nice thing. They will still ask me why. And that's how science works or should work. So one scientist says this, immediately others try to disprove it. And if you disprove it, then you have the prize, basically. And some prizes are good indications. I maybe not all of them. There are prizes for like, I don't know, religious science, and then like which scientists can prove that God exists better, they give the prize. I don't know, but like
Yeah.
prizes are um you can, it's optional, but in general scientific community tries to disprove ideas until they got out of options, like they no longer know how to disprove. So in
Yeah.
general, we every time you ask me, in general we go back to scientific thinking and the books, and that years in the past we will know better.
Cool. So what I hear you saying is you're saying that you don't necessarily listen to the people, you look at the work that they've done and you apply the principles of science to their beliefs rather than just listening to what they say.
I think
Oh,
only if I have time, energy, if I don't have to immediately take care of my family and my issues, if I have the interest. So I
yeah.
think the main thing here is not to think it deeply through. The main thing is to be um, mindful enough
Mm,
to at least remind yourself, I don't know. And then maybe I will read, maybe I will not. But
yes.
so many people here, I discuss politics and I have my own opinion. And it's pretty firm, maybe not 99, but I have some opinions.
Yeah.
And I discuss it, and everybody I talk to have two kinds of opinions. Either, mostly women, they will, I don't know, I don't read, I don't want to touch politics, I don't want anything, because once we
Mhm.
discuss politics, friendships stop, and I want to have friends, family. It's not mine. One position. And the other, most people have their vehement positions, like fight for them.
Yeah.
And when you ask why, they all kind of have reasons, opposite reasons, opposite positions, very high belief, just like in your situation, in your country.
Mm.
And I always feel like I read so much and I read like opposite sources. I'm less confident than you. Like the higher the level of voices, the
Mhm.
less productive the conversation will be. That's why maybe debates, public debates are not a very good way to discuss, because it immediately goes very high. The stakes are very high. And what you really want, you want everybody to first agree we don't know, which doesn't happen in a debate. First, we
Yes.
both say we don't know, and then we can try to touch the common ground. But I'm closer to this, and I'm closer to this. And like how, imagine we're all blind, and there is no spotlight, and there is no like no voice to call you. Like, how do you choose your direction? Like, okay, I feel this, and what do you feel? Oh, I feel that, and we try to
Yeah.
find the common path together. And maybe in some cases it will never happen. I believe our minds work so differently, and our background and our uh, philosophy of our families, that in some cases, with some beliefs, people just cannot find common grounds. Maybe that's why having children is a good idea. Each next generation is fresh and free to change their beliefs, fighting with their parents, but like they can change their minds easier than the previous generation could.
Yeah, man, I love all that thinking. And one of the things that I think we got to is and one of the difficult things about epistemology in a complex world is we can't always do all of the primary research ourselves. We have to believe people who have done that. And so we need to have good ways of figuring out who we believe, right? And I think that's so important. And I love everything that you said about that.
But I still believe that keeping in mind that we don't really know for sure,
Yeah, that's great.
seeing that
Yeah.
our minds are blind, like we have that, band on our eyes always. And
Yeah.
we just touch people around us and like, where are you going? Oh, why do you go there? Where are you going? And those are also blind, but some of them have, I don't know, a stick or something. Scientists have their sticks, so you can trust them.
Oh, what a wonderful metaphor.
Or maybe scientists walk like they form a circle. They put their hands on each other's shoulders, and that's how they can walk as one in one direction.
Nice. All right. I want to work towards wrapping up, but I want to ask at least one more question, which is in a slightly different direction, which is given your 102.3% confidence,
Okay, okay, 92, 98. You lowered it down. You made
98,
it.
given your 98% confidence that the American political system needs to change, if you were wrong, how would you find out?
Some things we cannot find out. If it changes, if someone comes, changes your constitution, and we see things getting worse,
Mm.
then that will be some evidence.
Hmm.
It, it might also be for some other reasons, like some outstanding reasons that just coincided.
Hmm.
Like, for example, the situation, like in like 50 years, the situation becomes so bad, you're on the brink of a civil war, God forbid. And then they change the situation, but the next day the war breaks out, and like some say it's because the system has changed, but maybe it's just they could not. It was a what's it called, nosedive, and it just the plane could not restore
Yeah.
the height. So you never know for sure. Once again, I'm not a scientist, and we might some things we might never know. Theoretically, I might uh, find a book or a source that tells us that a situation in one country or really changed, like from two party to multiple party, but things went uh, array, went to bed, and they would show us the reasons like why, and I would rethink, oh, it might also happen, like there are downsides.
Yeah.
But also, we know that the culture matters. So if it happens not in a Western culture, but in another culture, and maybe also some things coincided, I think some things we just can never know. So I would, to answer your question, I would continue monitoring how politics works in many countries in the world and see how it works depending on the number of parties and how easy it is to enter this scene of politics and to leave it. And then based on it, I can like a broad understanding the correlation between the health of the political party and the number of parties per se, like in general, worldwide.
Yeah. Okay.
No easy way to know how to disprove. I'll be back.
Okay.
I, I have a friend to show you.
Ah. Oh, wow. Oh, what a
Say
beautiful.
hello. Say hello.
Nice. Yeah, we've got lots of animals around here, and two, including two brand new kittens. I had to close the
Mhm.
door because otherwise they'd be climbing up my legs. Um, so
I
yeah,
have seven of these.
awesome.
Seven.
We have two little kittens, an adult cat, an adult dog, and 10 chickens.
I love chickens, not to eat, but to pet.
Hmm. Yeah, we have them for eggs.
I would love that.
Cool. Awesome. This has been amazing. We've gone an hour and a half. Do you have questions for me or thoughts about the process? Like, how did you feel about this? What's your feedback?
I feel that you're short. with time. You're short on time. I think you have some things to do, right?
There are always things to do.
Maybe we can exchange our ideas.
Yeah,
Um, to be brief, I can say it felt very therapeutic to me.
in a positive way.
Therapeutic is always positive, but like it felt when I was talking to you, um, maybe also knowing that most likely you don't heavily disagree with me.
Mm.
But I don't know. I didn't ask you, of course. But I felt that I could talk easily, and definitely it was something that you were doing.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I try to be completely neutral. And I'll say if you wanted to listen to a longer conversation that I've had on the topic of politics, listen to the election edition podcast with Larry, where at the very end, after about an hour and 15 minutes, he asked me what my opinion was, and he was shocked to find out that I supported Kamala Harris. He was just
Because it did not leak through your words and wording. It did not leak out.
right. But also, he didn't believe that anybody could actually support Kamala because he was so committed to Donald.
Conspiracy theory that the whole country voted for Trump and they just gave her numbers. Like they gave her 49% or something.
Oh, that's yeah. The conspiracy theories are all over the place.
That's right. I we can continue exchanging our thoughts and messages in the private messages. I wanted to tell you that in general, I'm interested in doing street epistemology, and just for you to know, maybe I could, I don't know, collaborate somehow. I'm just thinking off of the top of my head. I have a friend who works with Anthony Magnabosco to create a course on SE for lawyers all of a sudden.
Oh,
And I have my free early access to like test this course because I'm a lawyer by education. And like in general, this street epistemology is a very, very interesting um, thing for me, though in my personal life, I still struggle to use it. And I don't know why. Maybe I use it with my son, but not much with anyone else. And I would like to learn how it could work on a larger scale with people outside of my family and friends.
yeah.
I would really like to learn to do it on a more broad scale.
The thing that really helped me is two things. First, I went out and started doing it. And
You mean like out with a microphone and a camera?
I just started going out with a table and a notepad and a sign and just
Oh, you did?
yeah,
Like Anthony?
yeah, yeah, just started talking to people, not
Oh
recording.
gosh, when? How long ago?
Last summer.
Ah, so you're a fresh newbie.
Yeah, I mean, I've been practicing for a couple of years. I've done some stuff on the Street Epistemology Discord, but yeah, I'm a newbie at going out in
Mm.
public and doing it. But then David, who runs the Sound Epistemology YouTube channel, which is where my podcast is, um, he what he does is he's traveling around the country and visiting with people who want to learn SE, and he goes out with them in public and they do SE together and he coaches and he videotapes them and he puts them all on his channel. So he's been doing that now for 2 years. Um, that's basically, he's organized his life around it. I'm sure he would love to come to Moscow, but of course he would need funding to
Sure.
do that. So he doesn't have, like right now, it's just him in his car and whatever donations he gets. So, um, if you,
Question.
yeah.
Y- Um, I, I think I kind of gave up on SE, maybe because I have other problems in my life.
Mm.
I'm curious how you find it valuable. Like, why is it not just for fun or for learning, but like, what makes you think that you can spend your time doing it, and what do you get back for yourself or other people? Why is it valuable and worth doing?
The first thing is I really hope that I'm helping to raise the level of critical thinking in the community at large, trying to get people to understand what underlies their beliefs and whether their justifications are correct. So
And it's one person at a time, but I guess your thinking is not like all stars, sea stars on the shore will die, but I will say this one and then this one, and it matters, right?
well, I also hope that I'll get people interested in doing street epistemology with other people so that the ideas spread, right? And that's part of the motivation. Part of the motivation for you doing a podcast with it is twofold. One is I hope people will listen and learn. And the second is that just from a purely selfish point of view, if I just go up to somebody in a public place and say, hey, do you want to have a conversation? They distrust, like they don't know why I'm doing it. If I go up to them with a recorder and I say, hey, I have a podcast, now they have a box they can put me in. And now they understand. Now they're like, oh, okay, I can sign up for this because I know what a podcast is, right? So it's
And they'll be cool with it.
yeah, so it's a conceit that gets me into spaces where I wouldn't normally go. Um, and
Fascinating.
yeah, so that's part of it. The other benefit, the benefits that I get a couple of benefits as well for me. One of the benefits I get is that I manage people. And so I become a better manager and a better person to interact with in general when I get better at having civil conversations with strangers and when I get better at examining truth. And there's an example, if you go listen to my RFRX talk, the four disciplines, you'll
I
hear
will.
one of the stories that I tell there is about a situation where I had an employee who wasn't able to do their job and they were hiding it. And through using street epistemology techniques, I was able to get past their kind of reality distortion field, their emotional reaction, and get down to the facts. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is that I'm uh, kind of an introverted, antisocial person, believe it or not. And this helps me connect with people in ways that I don't normally connect with people in the rest of my life. So I've made better connections with strangers than often with people who I'm close to in my life.
Mhm. Your description of yourself fits what I am for most of my life, and I try to get out of that box.
Yeah.
Um, and I was thinking about ways how can I connect. It's not healthy to be isolated, and I thought, there are some people who just go out in the street and hug everybody, like hug me. And I thought I must do this, but that doesn't feel right. But this is like another option. I can tell you a very brief personal story.
Yes.
It just feels right. Um, uh, um, by the way, maybe it's not important, but I have autism, or at least it was strong. Like there were strong tendencies, and it lessons. I work very hard, extremely hard on um, being more emotionally stable. So today you see one of like best states I can be in. And sometimes I'm so, or I used to be so extremely anxious with people or alone. That's my backside story. Um, and why I'm saying it, I kind of struggled a lot in life, incredibly. And I remember myself thinking, I think I was 15 or around 15 or 16, and graduating from school. And suddenly, on my way home from school on a bus, I had a thought. I thought it would be so nice to go out in the street and interrogate people about their beliefs, like what you believe and why.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking back then, it warmed my heart and it made me feel like it would be nice, calm and connecting, finally connecting, because so many people having so many beliefs, how don't they go crazy by the fact that they can't agree and they are so vehemently sure? And like it drove me as a sensitive person, it drove me completely crazy. And I was like, just going out, talking to people, I would find something very valuable. Maybe we can come to truth together, or at least we could try to understand each other. So I kind of had that feeling when I was 15 on my own. There was no, like, I didn't discuss it with anyone, no books or movies. It was just like my feeling. Stand at a like corner, crossroads, and like with a notebook and just have conversations about people's beliefs and how they form them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now you have an opportunity maybe to do it.
That your reasons, the reasons that you gave me sound very like good reasons. If I think I can change the society alone, like Jesus Christ, I
Yeah.
definitely can't. But if I change my ways of thinking and I just get that connection with people to be healthy myself and maybe help just one other person, that feels good.
You've been listening to Conversations on the Coast, a series from Washington State featuring civil conversations using street epistemology to explore what people believe and why. Find out more at streetepistemology.com.